I am really excited that in our parish right now, there are a number of people who are on a really dynamic journey of faith. They are eagerly seeking to get to know Jesus Christ. They desire to be baptized and become members of the church. So I'm really enjoying working with some of those people, and maybe you're one of them. I'm always fascinated, though, by people's stories and how they get to go from perhaps not knowing God at all to then along the way moving their hearts so much, not just their minds, but their whole heart, their whole will, they come to know and love and follow Jesus. Nobody's ever described this process for me better than this American Catholic author, Sherry Weddell, who wrote a book called Forming Intentional Disciples. That word intentional is really key there. She says many people are Catholic out of habit, but we need to be intentional. We need to choose to be disciples of Jesus. And she talks about, in this book, she talks about not stages of faith, but 5 thresholds of conversion that a person must go through in order to make a true, authentic commitment to Jesus. Those thresholds, she says, are trust, curiosity, openness, seeking, and finally, commitment. And I think these are so important. I want us to look at them together now, but we'll do it through the lens of the woman we meet in chapter 4 of John's Gospel this weekend, the Samaritan woman who meets Jesus by the well. And she goes through all these stages in that one encounter with Jesus. It's, of course, a bit of a stylized conversation, but it's perfect for us to examine these concepts together. So let's begin. The very first threshold, Sherry says, is trust. In order for somebody to believe something, they have to trust someone or something first. They have to trust someone who is Catholic or Christian in order they might come to know something about God. And that's a problem because many people in the world don't have anyone in the church they can trust. They may not trust the church as a whole. They may not trust the priests, but they might trust you. They might know you as a good person. They might see your integrity, your goodness, and believe in you and trust you. So you may be the bridge of trust for somebody. That's a really important first step. So once that, and it's important if we want to evangelize people, we build those relationships of trust. We don't just get in there and start telling them what they must believe. We have to build trust with people. Now the Samaritan woman had to overcome that mistrust. The very first thing she says to Jesus is, hey, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. We shouldn't be talking together. We shouldn't be having this conversation because Jews and Samaritans did not mix. A deep mistrust between them. But of course, Jesus, being Jesus, was able to overcome that for her. The second threshold is curiosity. Once a person trusts you or trusts someone in the church, they then may be curious about you and what you believe and why you believe it. So listen out if you have people who say to you, why do you still go to church? Or why do you read the Bible? Why do you pray? Why don't you meet on Fridays in Lent? Why do you do the things you do? They might ask you, what's it like for you? What's it feel like when you pray? What's it like when you receive communion? Listen out for people who ask these questions because they may well be at that threshold of curiosity. And whether you are able to respond to them or not will be really crucial in their being able to come to believe in Jesus. The Samaritan woman reached this threshold. Jesus says to her, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me to give you living water. And she says, the well is deep. You don't have a bucket. How will you get this living water? She's curious about Jesus and the things he says. So curiosity has been enlisted in her. The third threshold then is openness. And I think this might actually be the most important piece of all these thresholds, because openness is about a willingness to change. Up to this point, a person might be curious about you. They're interested in you and how you do things, but they've got no interest in for themselves. I think people who we might describe as spiritual but not religious are in this earlier boat. They're in the curiosity stage. But openness is about openness to change, saying, I'm willing to change my life here. If I can find out more, I will make this commitment too. And it's really crucial. We see this really interesting question where Jesus and the woman are having this conversation, and Jesus stops and says to her, go call your husband. And her response is, I have no husband. It's a really bold, admission. And Jesus says, you're right, you don't have a husband. You had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not even your real husband. It seems very, very brusque, but we have to think about this. a lot of people take this very literally and say, oh yes, this terrible, this awful woman, she's been married so many times, she's living in sin now. That's why she went to the well in the middle of the day, not early in the morning when the other women would have gone to the well. Somebody decided that it seemed plausible, but think about it for a moment. How could any woman at this time have 5 husbands? Think about what happened, what would be done to any ancient woman who lived with a man outside of marriage or had multiple husbands. They'd be stoned. We hear that in the gospel in other contexts. There is no practical way a woman could actually do this. So what are these 5 husbands about? Well, they're actually symbolic. Husbands equals gods, and that's consistent with a lot of the Old Testament, where we hear God speak about his love for the people of Israel as the love of a husband for a wife. Spouse and God go together in this context. And so the 5 husbands are the 5 false gods of the Samaritans, which we encounter in the book of Kings. There's details about them. Basically, the Samaritans were Jewish people who had then begun to intermarry with all the other pagan neighbors throughout history. And in doing so, they took on the other gods as well. That's something, of course, that the strict Jews were completely against, hence the animosity between Jews and Samaritans. But here's worth noting. The 5 husbands are the 5 false gods of the Samaritans. So what Jesus is really saying when he says, go call your husband, he's saying to this woman, go call on your God. And this is where she stops and pauses, because she realizes she doesn't have a real God. She realizes she, as a symbol of the Samaritan people, they've had lots of gods in the past. They've got a bit of a mixed hybrid version of God right now. They kind of believe in Yahweh, but kind of still have the pagan elements too. And so she does not have a real, true God right now. And so that realization leads her to have openness. It's that realization that the way I'm living my life right now, it isn't working. The things I've tried doing before are not answering the questions I now have. Be they religious questions, be they other things in my life. And it may be hitting rock bottom. It may be a relationship breakdown. There might be something that goes wrong in our life that actually helps us say, I can't keep just doing what I'm doing. I can't just believe what I've always believed. I need something more. I'd like to say the word disruption. I think it would take some disruption in a person's life to trigger that deeper spiritual journey where they really yearn to find God and are willing to change their life. Willing to say, what I believed before is wrong. I need something new. It's a very big thing to do, but that's what this 3rd stage of openness is all about. So if a person is open, then they might move to the 4th stage, which is seeking. Now, seeking is asking lots of questions, and it's easily mistaken for threshold 2, which is curiosity. But curiosity is about the other person. It's about saying, I'm interested in what this means for you. When a person is seeking, they're now saying, what would it be like for me? How would I do this? How would I be baptized? And am I good enough for God? Will my sins really be forgiven? Could God really forgive me for all that I've done? And if I pray, how do I know if I'm really praying? How do I know if I'm hearing God or just my own thoughts? When people start asking these questions, they're really on the path. They are seeking God for themselves. Here's where we have to really nurture people and really, help give them good content, good information, really support them to help them find the answer they're looking for, so they're ready to make the really last phrase. The Samaritan woman was already there. She says to Jesus, give me that living water so I may never be thirsty. She recognized that she wanted a change in her life. She starts off by saying, Jesus, how do you get that living water? You haven't even got a bucket. But now she realizes it's something more than just water in a bucket. She recognizes there's something in Jesus. Jesus is the God that she's been searching for all her life. And all the conversations she and Jesus are having about which mountain she should worship on and what prophets there might be, it all comes down to her desire for God. She is desperately seeking him. And in Jesus, she finds him. So she is ready to make the 5th threshold, which is a commitment. Where we don't just keep on seeking, asking questions. At some point, we have to get off the couch and say, I choose this. Jesus, I choose you. I choose to surrender to you and give my life to you. I want to commit myself to you and say that I am now a Christian. I am now your faithful follower. That's a huge thing that many people are really afraid of doing. Many people are wary of commitment in all its forms, especially this incredible, irrevocable, eternal commitment that is a relationship with God. But that is what we're asking ourselves and all people to get to commit to Jesus. We don't hear the woman say, yes, Jesus, I now believe in you, but we know that she decides to do that. And then she goes and tells others. She goes back to her village and tells people about this incredible man who told her everything she'd ever done. You don't do that until you decide that this is real for you. This woman went through all those thresholds very quickly, overcoming mistrust, being curious about Jesus, being open to change because she realized that what she was doing was not working. She then sought Jesus and sought the truth of God and made that commitment. So I want to invite you to look and say, where am I in this? Can I recognize that I have gone through these stages myself? Have I been through these thresholds, or am I stuck at one of them? Because there are many good people sitting in church week after week who haven't really made a personal intentional commitment to Jesus yet. Maybe you're one of them. So have a look at these thresholds again and wonder, where am I? Am I stuck somewhere? Do I need help to get through one of these thresholds? And if you are and you're here in the parish, I'd love to help you with that. Let's look to the beautiful example of this Samaritan woman, who in one encounter makes you come to know and love and follow Jesus. I hope that you will too.